welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have John Bloom. How are we doing, John?
Good, Manny. I'm grateful for you having me on here.
That's all good. Like I've said before, it's usually something I do a lot of research on people with, but when you reached out, I was like, yeah, I need to have you on specifically because of the main topic of today, which is your book, and I think there is real value in it. But before we get into all of that, if you just give us a little introduction on who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So John Bloom, I run right now my own business called Elevated Athlete Development, and I'm in the Dallas area. But I had been in the college sector of strength conditioning, past 7 years, and where I started out, and kind of how I got into that was I had a great high school strength coach, or really middle school and high school strength coach. That I got to really learn under all through those, 6th through 12th grade, learning from him. And then I worked as his assistant my senior year and kind of started getting into coaching there. But then I went to Abilene Christian to go play football in college and played a year there. And then after the spring of that year, I decided I didn't want to play football anymore. And that was when I knew, okay, I do want to go be a strength coach and start doing this. So when I came back to ACU my second year, I started working with one of the strength coaches that had coached me in football, Brandon Decker, and he was my first mentor there in college. And worked with him with men's basketball and volleyball all year. And from that experience, I went home to Dallas during that summer and was able to train some of my high school's teams all on my own, and also train a group of college players there all on my own, and get that experience of having to program and not have anybody there and kind of make all the decisions. And that helped me a ton. And when I went back to ACU, because I had had that experience of running those teams and those players and those programs, I then got the opportunity to start running like the football red shirts and programming for them at ACU, and then taking over some other teams and started taking over more and more teams at ACU while I was still in my undergrad, which was a really, really cool experience that I had the opportunity to actually do that. And then, then I worked there at ACU for another year and a half after I graduated. And then I went up to Weber State with men's and women's basketball there. And then from there, I went with Darby Rich, another one of my mentors, and at Texas Tech, who's one of the best, and worked with men's basketball at Texas Tech with him. From there, I went to Oral Roberts and was the director and worked with men's basketball. And then that's when this past May I decided that it was time to get out of the college sector and kind of go and start my own business. And that's how we're here today.
Perfect. What was the decision from going from the collegiate setting to owning your own business? As a strength coach and a business owner, my time is quite limited. My favorite part about being a coach is the fact that I get to interact with athletes and be with athletes and really coach them. That's why I use TeamBuildr. I remember the days of searching for exercises, manually typing them in, and spending hours on spreadsheets and organizing my programs. This tends to be quite tedious and a lot of time consuming, which meant that I wasn't able to coach as much. So now for my business, TeamBuildr is a non-negotiable. It's an all-in-one programming platform that lets you create and deliver workouts to your athletes just in a few clicks. With TeamBuildr, I can customize programs, track athletes' progress in real time, and generate performance reports. My athletes get full ownership of their progress and can even share feedback on how they felt the session's going. Having this in place actually gives me more time to coach and be with my athletes. If you're ready to take your next step in your programming, give more time to your athletes, head over to teambuilder.com and use promo code PACHALKUP, that's PACHALQUP, and start your 30-day free trial.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but I would say, one of the big drivers was going through. So right before, this last year, I got married, and kind of going through our first year of marriage together, and just through that thinking about, what we wanted for our future as a family, especially once we start having kids and stuff, and kind of how that lines up with what working in college athletics looks like. And basically, like, we wanted more autonomy in the career and life, in terms of who I work with, when I work with them, how that's how that's happening. In the college sector, also, you got travel, but it's also like, can we do these things or plan these things on a schedule? And I'm like, my wife would ask me things like, no, like I'll let you know the night before because we might have a recruit, we might have whatever. I really, really can't tell you anything past 24 hours, if that. Um, so having that autonomy was a big part, and then I think part of it also just the way college athletics is going a little bit with the portal and NIL, and things kind of just getting a little more transactional, and just
Mm,
changing a little bit, and also just the you know I guess having less long term relation or less time with athletes, because a lot of times, especially in basketball, like you're getting a lot of these kids for like 9 months, and then you get a whole new team, so you don't kind of have that more long term relationship and long term development aspect. So all of that kind of combined, and also just like really reflecting on my values, and does working in college align with like who I fully want to be as a coach and person, and kind of with
mm.
just all that stuff combined, made the decision that it would be a better setting to set all that up, and for our family, and be who I want to be as a coach and person while starting my own thing instead.
Yeah, I think that's becoming like more of a path that coaches are looking into, is that autonomy of your own schedule and
Yeah.
really being able to not, especially if you've got a family, it's a little bit different than when you're single and you can just take off on 24 hours notice and you're fine. There's
Yeah.
no one really to report to. Um, in terms of the book, how long and what was that process like from transitioning into that college where you you have all these people around you and you can reach out to coaches and whatnot, and then sort of going back into that, okay, let me just try and figure out this book and the timings and everything else that goes into publishing a book.
Yeah, so I started the book when I was still at Oral Roberts. It was, coming up on a year and a half ago. It was last September. Um, and when I started it, like you know, I didn't know I was going to go start a business. I was still fully at ORU. That decision didn't come till months later. Um, you know, more than half a year later, really. And so, I'd gotten pretty far while I was at RU with it, and really, once I transitioned in the spring and summer to start my own business, kind of had to wrap up collecting some responsive and stuff, but really a lot of it had been collected at that point, I think, and more so putting it all together, and figuring out kind of all the other stuff that I had no idea how to do before, of writing a book, and learning how to format it, and publish it on Amazon, and just all the stuff that goes into that, and making it you know a quality thing, instead of kind of something just thrown together.
What was the reasoning behind you wanting to put this book out there?
You know, it really just started with an idea where I got the idea from Tim Ferriss's book Tribe of Mentors, where he had a similar concept where he had these 11 questions he was trying to figure out, and he sent them to like the best in the world of all different professions, and then got their answers back, and put the book together from those answers. And I'd read that book before, and then I was, last September, I mentioned when I had the idea for starting it, I was reading through his introduction of him explaining that process of him starting the book. And that idea kind of popped into my head of doing this for strength and conditioning. And I was like, no, it should be for all types of coaches and all types of coaching perspectives. Um, so that's when I really had that idea, and it really wasn't. I don't even know if it was to make a book like this, though. It was more so like put together a PDF or something like that, and
Mm,
kind of like a cool idea. But as I got more into it, it's like, wow, this could be really impactful. I mean, I was getting impacted all the time by responses I started to get from coaches. So that was when I was like, I want to make this like actual real thing, because like this is like what I would have wanted when I was first starting coaching, and that's kind of
yeah.
become part of like my mindset with is like I want to make the book like that I would have loved to have getting into coach, and it's not just for new coaches, for like coaches of all points of their career, but especially like getting to hear from all these coaches of like, because it's one thing I always ask myself is like when I see like a top coach, like how did they get to where they're at? Like how did they become the coach they are, like like skill wise, but also like how did they rise up to their position? And there's
Mm,
so many just stories and experiences and lessons and successes and failures from these high level coaches that you get to hear those stories and see those experiences from, um, which I just think I would have absolutely loved to have that when I was first starting to see all those different paths and how people got to be elite at coaching.
yeah,
So that's really been one of the driving forces when I think about what I want this book to do is like how can it impact those people that are just starting out, and like what would I have wanted when I was there.
100%. Yeah, this is kind of like why I started this podcast. It's that we're obviously aware that there's some bigger podcasts in this industry about getting into the finite detail of each other's programs and whatnot. But I
Yeah.
want to know, like, what experiences did you have? Like, how did you come up with your
Hmm.
concept? How did you come up through the industry? And this sort of gives like a more perspective insight into the coach and how they go through their program. And it's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. Like when I was a young strength coach, I wish I had something like this where I could just put on and listen to a career from start to finish and
Hmm.
figure out again one of the most one of the most popular answers that I get from coaches is like choose your mentors. Like
Hmm.
make sure that you align with the mentor and the mentor that you have aligns with the mission that you want to achieve at the end of your career. Like
Yep.
make sure they all full like flows together.
Yeah.
In terms of you saying that you were getting impacted all the time through the responses coming in, what was the most impactful to you and why?
Oh man, that's hard because I don't know. There's so much stuff in there.
There's a lot.
It's a big book. It's a big book. Um, but it might. So like, right, there's 12 questions in the book that kind of all the coaches answer. And so like one thing I did is like create themes that popped up for each question, and I would say if I was kind of maybe pick like one area, or like one question in the themes that popped up there, I'll probably say the question of how do you overcome times of like struggle, overwhelm, and burnout.
Mm,
I think that was probably the most impactful, like overall of answers coming in for that question. I think probably because of how real a lot of the coaches were and just authentic and really sharing a lot of their hardest times in their career and life. And lots of failures, lots of struggles, and then really just talking about things that can really help because that I think me and you both probably know that's it's common to kind of have those feelings during
it's not
periods
often
of
talked
your
about either.
career as coaches, right? And so I think it was really big with how many like high level coaches in here are talking about that because and this is something I've talked about with a number of coaches with it, but it's like sometimes when you're in those moments, you feel like it's just you and you kind of just stay within yourself. Whether it's feeling like you can't talk to someone about it or like feeling like you're the only one and like there's some sort of shame if you like talk to someone about it. But I've talked with a lot of coaches, like it's really cool how many people are talking about this because then it just shows us, like, especially if we're talking about the younger coaches, like, hey, like even these people that are like who you want to be like later in your career, like at the highest level, like they went through this too, and they had these struggles too. So like you don't have to hide that or just internalize it. Like you can talk to people and then also like here's some really valuable lessons on how to combat or help that through your career.
100%. And that was actually one of the questions that I was going to bring up. And
Mm.
I mean, I'm very open and honest with everyone and everything that I do. And I've been recently feeling burnout, and I mentioned it to you when we were sort of
Yeah.
going back and forward. And it's that thing where it's not something that's often talked about in this industry. Is like the amount of pressure and time commitment you are to just focus on everything. everything else and everyone else, that you don't have that ability to look inwards and be like, okay, I'm actually overdoing myself. Let me take
Mhm.
some measures to avoid that burnout. Again, when you're a business owner, it's also a little bit different because you're still having the same time pressure, same everything else that goes in with a collegiate program, but now you're having to figure out where the money's coming from to
Yep.
for your facility, for any contracts, any coaches coming in as well. And then you're like, oh fuck, I have social media as well now to worry
Yeah.
about. Like for me, having this podcast is great because I get to speak to such high level coaches and great people. But then I have to think, oh fuck, I need to do social media now, and I hate social media with a passion. But it's like
Yeah,
it's one of those things that I kind of need to do it
for
regardless of
sure.
my own feelings.
I
Um,
feel you there.
it's that open and honesty conversation as well. And I've spoke to a lot of coaches. Um, I'm going to ask you a question, and I didn't notice it until I was in it.
Mhm.
And when you see a head strength and conditioning coach or a head coach coming into the weight room, there's always that like silence and respect that follows them, right? But have you ever noticed that no one actually asks them how they are and how they slept and how they feel that day?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
when I
yeah, for
was
sure.
with Coach Ron McKeefrey, I made sure that like at some point during the day I was like, "Hey coach, how are you doing? Like, how are you doing?" And he would always put a hand on my shoulders, like, "I'm good, buddy. I'm good." But it's like it's that thing of we can also make sure that we're looking after each other just by asking simple questions to to at least let them know that we are there somehow.
Mhm. Yeah, and, that makes me think of Darby Rich that I mentioned before, and his answer to this book, he talks about, in the beginning of his answer, he's like, we're paid to be the Superman and Wonder Woman of the program and to always show up, with the same demeanor and enthusiastic and energy and life giving and all that type of stuff. Right. And that's kind of like part of our responsibility, so it's like, there's kind of that dichotomy of like showing showing vulnerability and then having that and like you're saying, like, people checking out and like it's like we're always supposed to be good, right? That's what we're supposed to show our athletes is like we're always good. We always have a good mindset, a good attitude, all that stuff. But sometimes that kind of creates like a double persona where really on the inside that's not how it is, you might be on like
Mhm.
4 hours of sleep and completely
Caffeinated as hell.
yeah, making it up. So, I think it's important to understand, like, yeah, that is our role, but I think there is a lot of strength in showing that you're not always good.
Mm,
And I think when you do that with you might feel with your athletes that creates, I don't know, like a weakness or like makes them see you differently. But I really think that creates stronger relationships and stronger impact down the line by showing that. um right, because I mean that, I think that's becoming more and more with athletes, with talking about mental health and all that, and having those conversations with our athletes. And I think if you as the coach have those conversations and be real about yourself too, I think that opens up your own athletes to being real with those conversations too. um, actually, just I think it was like 2 days ago, I saw this clip of Deion Sanders talking on a
mhm,
podcast, and he was talking. I think the question was like if he's ever struggled with mental health, and he's like, yeah, like he talked about this. The story got me, man. But he talked about when he was playing professional baseball when he was like late 20s, about how he drove his car off the side to try and kill himself, really, and he survived, and kind of some people stepped in and really changed it. But he talked about it's like, like I'm like people see me and they see Prime, like Prime's good, like they don't need to check on him, like he's the guy, like they don't
mhm.
need to check on the guy. um so people didn't see that, but I think that that goes for both coaches and athletes of like,
Yeah.
one quote from Rod Olson in the book was like, you can't assume resilience. And he was talking, he does a lot of work with like Navy SEALs and stuff, and he's talking about military, and even these Navy SEALs are like the toughest soldiers, some of the toughest soldiers in the world. A lot of them are killing themselves. and that was one of the lessons from talking to this Navy SEAL about that. He's like, no matter who you're talking about, you can't assume resilience. Everybody
Mm.
has a breaking point in some way.
Yeah, I've actually recently heard an interview with The Rock, and the
Hmm.
interviewer was like, "You're always working, like you're always doing something work related, or like whether it's media, whether it's films, whatever else. But like, when do you have time to have fun?" And like, this sparked The Rock really like having to think about that question. And then the next couple of interviews after this guy, he was like, "This is one of the toughest questions I've ever been asked." Because like, yes, I'm always working. Like, what A is fun for me?
Yeah,
B, like, when do I do it? And then how often do I do it? And it's that thing where, as coaches, we're so focused on perfection and perfecting what the program is or it could look like or be, but we don't actually are we're not able to switch off all the time when we can
yeah.
just like completely shut off and be like, okay, this is me time, this is fun time. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah, and I think, like you talked about before with business where, you gotta get paid, you gotta do social media, all that stuff. And right, like was like part of the reason for doing the business is to have the autonomy. But then it can be easy to really get drawn into this cycle of always letting stuff seep in and not having any boundaries, and it never really
Mm,
turns off because it's just like part of your life. And that's definitely something I have to battle and check myself on. And there's definitely times where it's like, okay, these couple of weeks have to be a sprint, right? Where it's going to be
mm,
some longer days and nights, but especially like for my wife, like I've got to be intentional of making sure it's not a nonstop 24/7 when we said we were going to do this thing, so we could have autonomy over this and have intentionality and kind of what that schedule looks like. So it's definitely something I always have to continue to try and have to get better and check myself
mhm.
on of kind of setting some of those boundaries.
Yeah, this is a point that I bring up often. It's I'm really thankful for my fiance because she will pull me aside and she'll be like, "Dude, you need a holiday," and like like that's kind of like our code for like I
Yeah.
need to stop what the fuck I'm doing and just like relax for a little bit. Because
Yeah.
like you're right, like if we're looking at growing and developing a business, it's a 24-hour, like 7 days a week type
Hmm.
business where
Yeah.
every resting minute your brain's like, okay, I need to do this tomorrow, and then I need to do this, then I need to reach out to this guy, I need to speak to whoever, and then you're just like, it just consumes more and more time. Like, I again,
Hmm.
my partner's awesome because she sees when I'm getting a little bit too into everything, and she's like, dude,
Yeah.
pump the brakes, let's look at let's
Yeah.
go for a drive.
Yeah.
um you also have a question in the book that personally I really connected with, and
Hmm.
it's what goes into you staying or leaving. And then the other one is, what are the first steps you take when you come into a new role? And I'll
Yeah.
kind of break down as to why that's important to me.
Hmm.
So the first one is first steps you take when you go into a role. And again, those who haven't worked with teams or collegiate settings, like, you're not the main person by any means. Like, the head coach has the first and last say. So if you're coming into like an Olympic program, there's probably multiple coaches that you're going to have to deal with and speak with. Now you can only do so much depending on how much the head coach wants you involved with his athletes. So for me, my first step is always to have a conversation and let the coach know that they do have the last say, they have the first say. My goal is to create better athletes with longevity and all those buzzwords that we hear. But it's kind of like that give and take relationship.
Yeah.
I want to do this. Like, what do you need from me? What was your thought process behind that question, including it, and what were some of the responses that you personally resonated with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I tried to, like, with these questions, like, really put questions that I wanted to know answers to, and I think, that's something where, I've had, a lot of us coaches have frequent job change, especially early on, right? Pretty quick turnover, and I've had that. So you're having to start these jobs, and have those first steps. And I think it's just, I just in my mind is like, it'd be cool if, just to have all these ideas from people, a lot older and more experienced that have done these for so long, to let people kind of pull from. And they're not gonna do everything that everybody does, right? Many of the coaches do it differently, but now they've got all these ideas that, like, okay, maybe they take that job now. It's like, okay, let me go look through some of these and kind of develop my plan of what I resonate with, so that I do have a plan. Because I think you should have a plan going into a new job of kind of how you're going to execute that, and what that looks like in different stages and areas, rather than just trying to maybe wing it. Um, and for me, so you know what I do? I'll pull up the themes for that, and maybe talk about. I can talk about the themes, kind of what really popped up and kind of what resonated with me. Let me pull it up. So for that, there's a couple themes there, right? So I'll just read off the six themes, and I'll kind of talk about what really was most important for me. So the first one is get to know everyone and prioritize relationships. Number two is know and call people by name. Three is get
Mhm.
clear expectations on how you provide value. Four is be like sponge, ask, observe, listen. Five, learn what worked previously. And six, understand the social and power dynamics. And with that, I think one that was big for me was the clear expectations part, and really just creating clarity. I think that's so huge, because I think so often in coaching there's a lack of clarity between coaches and athletes, between coaches and coaches, administration and coaches. So I think, like, if you're not the boss and you're coming, like you're saying, you got a head coach or whatever, creating clarity on how you provide value is so huge, because you might have an idea of how you provide value to the team, but the person paying your bills might have a different
Mhm.
idea, and your idea needs to match up with their idea, so that you can actually provide value in the way they want value provided, right? And what they hired you to do. Because if we're talking about the strength coach perspective, different head coaches expect different things out of their strength coach, right? So you understand how you provide that for that head coach in that program, and having those conversations, really creating clarity initially, will really drive the direction of how you serve that program. So I think that's huge, because a lot of times I think it's like more so come in and it's like, okay, I'm going to figure out like what I want to do, and like maybe it matches up with that or not, but just from the jump, establishing that is huge. Another one, I think, kind of along the theme like we are talking about, of like how you're having those conversations and figuring out what they need, is the one with like be like sponge, which that quote came from Fergus Conley, and his part is like, be like a sponge, right? We want to, when you're first at a place, you want to listen and observe and ask questions and do all that a lot more than trying to come in and throw all your own ideas to the place, right? This place has been operating without you, in a certain way, and you might have great ideas, but I think you need to learn the context of the place you're coming into,
Mhm.
right? To see how your ideas can fit to that context. And you need to understand why things have been running that they've been running, because you might have some great idea, but you might not understand why it's not being done that way. And you try and do that, and it just blows up because you didn't understand the certain logistics, or whatever it was. Um, so, one really good thing, like Charlie Mellon, Baylor men's basketball strength coach, talked about, he learned from another coach at Florida State, where that coach at Florida State came in with the women's basketball staff, and you know the head coach wasn't ready for all this change that he wanted to bring. So he just made small little changes, and then continued to build trust, right, with the head coach. And just, as it went on, continued to make small changes. And 5 years down the line, like, majority of everything he wanted it to be was the way he
Was
wanted it to be. But I think if he went about it the other way, where it's like, okay, I'm going to change everything and do all this stuff right away, that can, I think, you have to earn that trust sometimes from the boss or head coach you're working with, and you can't do everything you maybe want to right away. um, so I think that's a really huge part of really learning the environment and gaining that trust, before you make these dramatic changes.
Yeah. Um, and the second one was what's the decision process like for starting a new role or leaving your current role? What
Hmm.
was your thought process behind that one, and why was that an important question for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I don't know if that's something, that's talked about a ton, but I just think, like I said before, like as a coach, you're changing jobs a lot sometimes. Um, so I think understanding your process and system for thinking about that is important. And also, again, just like kind of having like all these people that have done it for a long time, getting to see how they've made those decisions is really important. And also, like with some of the more veteran coaches, it's like they talk about how that decision making process changes throughout the course of their career, right? Or maybe at the beginning it was all about like rising up and getting better jobs and kind of climbing the ladder, and then now that they're older and they have families, like now it's all about making decisions based on their family.
Mm,
So kind of understanding, like I put it as like career prioritization, basically, of kind of making decisions based on those factors of, like we talked about before, like who you're responsible for, like all those different things. That's really big. But I think it was, one thing I think that was impactful with that though is like with all this stuff of making jobs, or I mean making job decisions. Thomas Thomas at LSU women's basketball strength coach, he talks about this where like it's easy to think like the grass is greener somewhere else, but he's like, he's won multiple national championships, right? He's done all these things, but it's like problems don't go away by getting the next bigger job, right? There's problems everywhere, right? It doesn't get better, and problems don't go away by getting a bigger logo job, right?
mm,
He talks about we have the power though to choose which problems we're going to coexist with, because no matter where you're at, like there's going to be problems. um and and so then I think one thing I've really been thinking about this the last couple of days, but like with that, when we're choosing that, it really like our environment or like our experience comes down to us. Really, it's not about the job, it's about us. And he talks about, like what our foundation is. So the way we perceive things, like the way we perceive problems, the way we're rooted in our foundation and our values, like that's going to determine our experience way more than what the job is, or all those different things. Obviously there's better jobs, worse jobs, better situations and whatnot, but so much of it comes down to how we view it and how we approach it. I think so really deciding like how,
mm,
like what your foundation is and what you're rooted in, I think is huge in knowing that jumping to another job isn't going to fix problems with who you are, or how you're approaching life and your career, right? If you're miserable, with and not enjoying your job, like, and you go to another strength job somewhere else, like it's probably going to be the same way unless you kind of change with internally some stuff, and
mhm.
work on yourself some.
Yeah, what would be your advice for those strength coaches that are in a position of a head S&C coach, but the head coach is constantly demanding more load, and you're kind of that crossroads where it's too much for the athletes to handle. So yes, there's injuries coming, and what would be your advice for them if they want to like leave that place or just maneuver how that would then progress from there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would. I mean, maybe you can look for other jobs, but I don't know that I would leave because of that. If that's why you're leaving, like I feel like that's something you've got to learn to handle and improve, right? I think in that situation, again, like if you run from that, you might just go to another job and it might be the same thing. Like you want to create the skill set to be able to improve that situation, I think. um and obviously there's a lot of ways and context of what that relationship is and how it's going. But I mean, first of all, you gotta create a relationship with that head coach where they trust you and value. And I think part of that is, like we talked about before, like kind of like I talked before with like you can't come make all this drastic change right away. Like I think with those conversations with the head coach, you can't just go in there saying like you're wrong, like this is terrible, like we have to change everything because they're never going to listen to that, right? It's again, it's about making like small changes and small influences and letting that build up, right? So like creating that relationship with the head coach and creating those small changes and choosing which battles you want to pick, like which
Hmm.
things are
Yep.
going to create the biggest return on investment for you if you get this changed, right? You don't want to battle with that head coach about whatever decision that really doesn't matter or matters really small. But if there is a decision that okay, I really feel like this is really putting the team at harm, okay, maybe that's the one you want to have a real conversation about. But I think you can never approach it from a demanding perspective, but like, hey, coach, like, come from the relationship. Like, this is what I'm seeing, maybe from the data or from the conversations with the athletes or from watching whatever it is. Um, and this is what I would recommend. But again, like they make the decision. So you can't, I don't think you can demand it because I think that's always going to make them run the other way. You've got to create influence with the trust you've built in that relationship, in the value provided, and then just let it continue to build and build and build in your influence where you get to a point where they fully trust your decision making and they're like, you tell them, hey, like, coach, this is too much. Like, okay, like, what do I need to do? And then you can get to that point, but you never get to that point if you try and get there too fast.
The reason I ask is I know with some coaches, they always want to do the more aerobic more often, and some will demand the coaches to do it. And the coaches, because they're not, again, they don't have that relationship to be like, actually, I think we actually need to back off them because they've got like a big game coming up or whatever the scenario may be, is having that courage to be like, okay, no, actually, I think this is a little bit more on the dangerous side. Let's see how we can work together to get you happy that your athletes are working in a way that you want, but also not over exert them and exhaust them for what's to come in the season.
Yeah, and I think like you were talking there, like you got to create connections too in terms of connecting the dots. Like, okay, we're talking about games, and maybe they had this weekly practice layout that killed the athletes. They're exhausted and they performed really bad in the game. And then there's another week where, like, for whatever reason, we had a really short, easy practice the day before the game or whatever, and we were fresh and played great, and like that's really simplified version right there, but like trying to connect the dots in their head of when we did these things, like this was the result and worked really well, and like when we did this, like we were tired, because sometimes like they're not thinking the way we are when we're looking at all those things, and they may not see that. So trying to find those the ways you can connect what we did with what happened, and then I think obviously using data too, even if you don't have like different levels of technology, even if it's like in basketball, like, I mean, you could even just track like how long you practice each day, and what was our shooting percentage, or
Hmm.
whatever in the game, and different stuff like that, and things that factors that matter to those head coaches, and just help them see that more in a more real way, instead of just saying like too much or too little, or
Hmm.
whatever it is.
What was your personal favorite, like, funny response to a question?
Ooh, huh. Funny response. Oh man, I don't know. Yeah, it was kind of funny with a couple of the ones where it was like, the you get 2 30-minute sessions a week. Like,
Hmm.
what are you gonna do? There was a couple of coaches that were like, um, I'm not even gonna do that like that. Like, if we're only getting 30 minutes, like that's a problem right there. So like, it's not even worth doing that. I don't know. That was kind of funny. I don't know. I'd have to look back through more to find that down. But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, no, like that's just not good enough at all.
So I like to ask that because it's such a knowledge driven book where there's a lot of time and thought that's went into this book, but there's also these pockets of like, whether it's intentional or non-intentional, but you do get a chuckle from like some of the
Yeah.
responses in it.
Mhm.
And obviously you wrote the book, you experienced conversations with these coaches and whatnot, so I wanted to know like what was the one that got you like heavily chuckling.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of speakers, you do have a stack lined up on the book. What was your most impactful from like question one to the end of their sort of response?
Oh, I don't know if I can pick one coach. Um, like you said, there's so many great coaches in it. And great wisdom. Like, I put in it too, but it's like, don't just read like the top coach, like the
Hmm.
people, like read, because some incredible insights and wisdom are from coaches like you probably never heard of. So like, from coaches that aren't super well known all the way to top. Like there's just so much good stuff, that I don't feel like it'd be right for me to just pick one. Um, I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to another hundred something coaches if I just picked
Fair,
one
fair.
coach.
What I will say, and I recommend everyone doing it, is while you're going through these, have a highlighter with you so
Yeah.
that you can, because like there's specific quotes that get you to think differently, and you're kind of like, huh. Like I always reference this. In one of my internships, I had a coach, and he was like programming, and my question to him was like what's the thought process behind like your drive it, like your principles, your methods, like whatever else it is. And he's like, well, one thing that I'm really looking for is the push to pull ratio. And that's so simple. And I was like, yeah, we kind of, yeah, our whole job is to create a balanced all-rounded athlete. Like why don't we consider how many pulls to pushes they have in a particular session? So that to me really stuck out, because then like these little pockets of quotes and sort of speaking to different coaches, you kind of have a different thought process to now your development of programs, your interaction with coaches. And you had Bart Bartholomew in it. Conscious
Hmm.
Coaching was like it was the first book I ever read on the industry back in 2015 or
Yeah.
16. And that book completely shaped the way that I coach and the way I approach athletes. So like if you're going through this book, when you go through this book, have a highlighter with you, because there's little pockets, and revisit them, because like you will get something from them like every time you come across.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, there's just, I mean, again, like we said, it's a big book. It's, so there's, like there's lots of coaches and just different, like completely different perspectives from like, you could take this one coach that's at the highest level and then, another coach at the highest level, and they could have completely different perspectives on one of the questions.
Hmm.
Um, and you might resonate with one of those, or one might spark something for you different than the other. So I think that's one of the really cool things is the different perspectives, and like some, like you're saying, like as you go through it, like highlight or whatever, find what resonates with you. Like there's probably going to be some sections of it that are like mind blowing or life changing for one coach, and then another coach doesn't really care about the section. But then
Hmm.
that other section is huge for them and not for someone else. So I think so many different points are going to resonate with different people in different ways based off what they're going through, what
Hmm.
they're trying to figure out in their own life.
There's also slow burners, which is why I think this book is important. So like there will come a time that perhaps today may not make sense or it may not resonate with you. Like as you go through this industry, situations happen and different life experiences occur at the same time. You go back and you look at that answer completely different. And I think that's what's
Hmm.
awesome about this type of books. And again, Coach Ron McKeefer is one of my biggest mentors, and I will always attribute a lot of what I'm doing now because of him. But like his weight room wisdom book, it's the exact same thing. Like so many great coaches give like little pockets of information about their experiences. Like we all have those out like sayings that just make sense to us But
Mhm.
when we share them, it's kind of like different people's perspectives sort of shape and mold what that message is and interpret and make useful for their program.
For
So
sure.
it's always good to go back and listen to these books or read these books when different situations happen along your career too.
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure, and I think even, like, because I've been collecting responses, over a year now, it's like, even for me, like, when I maybe when I first got the responses to, half a year later, it's like, "Oh, like, I see that a little bit differently or read that a little bit differently now based on different changes for me." And I also think, like, your different points of your career probably be interested in different coaches in the book, like,
Mhm.
like, as we're talking about, like, young coaches reading it, for like a young strength coach, like when I was first starting, I probably would have just gone straight to all the strength coaches in the book. But like now, like I probably get, especially when I was working the team sector still, it's like I'd probably read more of like the sport coaches, like the head basketball or soccer, volleyball, whatever coaches, and see their perspective. Um, like because at that point in my career, it's like, okay, I'm so much more into like how does that relationship work and how are we collaborating and how am I cutting down the delineation between strength coach and sport coach as much as possible and seeing their perspective as much as possible so that I can influence the sport as much as possible.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that another question that, again, it's a big emphasis on this podcast, and it's the strength coaches coming up or the coaches wanting to make it into this industry.
Hmm.
And you have a question where it's like, what's your sort of advice for them and what mentorships they should seek out for? What was, again, that thought process behind that question? What were some of the responses that you mostly resonated with?
Yeah, I think again, like with the intention of it for like what would I have wanted when I was a young coach? I think that question then just kind of drives directly into that of okay, these people that are just trying to get into coaching, just starting, like, here's advice, and then that advice was all like a million different directions from different coaches, but then like the mentor aspect, I think coaching is just so driven by mentorship. I think like we said before, like you wouldn't be there without your mentors. Like I definitely wouldn't be here without my mentors. Um, and I think like Robert Greene has a book like called Mastery, great book on just mastering it. Talking there about like apprenticeships, right? And I really feel like coaching is a apprenticeship driven
Hmm.
profession. Where like that's where you're gonna like that's where I didn't learn from college about how to be a strength coach. Like I learned from working with
Doing it.
Brandon Decker and being his apprentice basically as I worked with him through those first couple of years. So I think those initial mentors you have and then mentors you have throughout your career are just instrumental in who you and your career are going to become. And I think it's important to know how to choose those mentors or
Yeah.
find those mentors. So, and I think some of the key points in the book with that, with the mentorship part, like one, like do not chase big logos that, because, that
It doesn't
doesn't
always mean
mean,
anything.
yeah, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're great, but, you might go to a place, you might not get to do anything or learn anything and you're just there. But they might be great, but they might not be the right fit for you. Um, I think you want to chase the right experiences and situations for yourself. And I think there's a ton of value. Like for me, like at working, like going at a smaller place, like a small, high school, college, whatever it is, where you can get a lot of responsibility. I think that's huge. So you can actually learn and develop yourself and
Mhm.
implement and get feedback. And I think another one that really has resonated with me is like people talk, like a number of coaches talked about, you need to decide like what is it that you want to be good at or learn about.
Mhm.
Find the people that are the best in the world at that, and then go to those people or pay those people to teach you and work with them and learn with them. um, so, rather than just like, I want to find the highest level coach, like, okay, I really want to learn these specific skills, and that person is the best at this skill. So I'm going to go bug them until I can go, shadow them or intern with them or whatever it is, and just soak up everything from working with that person, apprenticing with that person, and grow in that skill that I'm trying to grow in.
100%. It's also looking at internships, not so much of a free labor type deal, but an investment into your career. So, like,
Hmm.
when I went across to the US, it was a lot of money that student
Yeah.
doesn't have. And for me, I was like, whatever it may be, it'll probably pay itself at some point.
For sure.
So like, let's do it. Even like education wise, like my university degree, I look at it as an investment. So while I was going through it, you bet your ass that after every class, I was asking my lecturers all the questions I had, emails at fucking sometimes ungodly hours. Like they were all like, I was getting my money's worth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because you have to look at like how are experiences or jobs setting you up
Hmm.
5+ years down the line. Like especially early on, you can't look at it of like just based on pay or what the job is or whatever. Like oh no, like I'm gonna take this slightly higher paying job because it's slightly higher paying, but this other one would actually be such a better experience for your growth. You got to chase experience and development. Like over money or any of that thing early on because exponentially that will lead to such bigger returns down the
Hmm.
line. um like for me, like one job, like when I was at that Weber State job, incredible basketball job, super great history, like Damian Lillard, all these pros and stuff, been from there, awesome coaching staff, really successful team. Didn't pay super great though, but is like, okay, like I can come there, do a great job, be with a great program, have a great experience. And then it's just going to lead to way better jobs rather than maybe taking a higher paying job that wasn't as good and not going to set me up as great. And then like the next year, okay, now I'm going to Texas Tech for double the money of Weber State. So I think like you have to find what is going to help you become the
Hmm.
best coach instead of get paid a little bit more because you're not going to get paid that much anyway at the beginning, so you might as well get the better experience.
100%. I agree. And like, I've been in a position where, because of me being in the UK, sometimes the US experience doesn't mean all that much to people across here. So, like, when I
Yeah.
came back, people are like, oh, I want you to work for free. I was like, well, it's also knowing when to
Yeah.
not do it.
Yeah.
um, so, on that, what would be your advice to young strength coaches or coaches wanting to come into this industry?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is to find that great mentor, that first great experience, and then just fully dive into that. Where kind of like the question of like the first steps for the job, whereas like be like a sponge, observe, ask, listen. That's
Hmm.
that's what you should be like. You should be fully intentional in trying to learn as much as possible and ask as many. Become a great question asker, right? That's huge
Hmm.
for all aspects of your career. But one story like Bill Brogdon, he's this incredible Hall of Fame golf coach, and he talked about he did this GA at Duke basketball like way back, and is a way back, and there's these Hall of Fame coaches now, and like QB Brown, and then some other coaches that are like legends of basketball coaching now, but they were assistants and stuff there. But he talked about he would take notes during the practices like every day for like a year and a half, and he had a whole suitcase full of notes, from things of like what they did say, what they didn't say, like all those aspects. Like be really intentional in
Hmm.
observing and finding and during that start to articulate to yourself like who you want to be a coach based on what you're observing, and take the great things from those mentors. And when you find a great place, there's going to be so many great things, but also start to figure out like, okay, how do I put my own spin on it, and what are the things that I see. Maybe you're in a bad situation with not the best mentor or people around you. Okay, like what am I taking from that I don't want to be as a
Hmm.
coach, and
Yep.
and really really solidifying like who you want to be. And that doesn't happen in the first year, I don't think. Like it definitely takes a lot longer than that. I'm still definitely figuring it out, but just starting to, based on really intense observation, like learning who you want to be, and then you start trying to find if you're in a place where you're not getting that direct responsibility of maybe like coaching or programming or whatever it is, find opportunities for responsibility, whether that's like some short side job with like, I don't know, like a high school or like whatever it is where you can get experience or maybe you're just, helping a friend or coaching them or like you're just doing mock programs like,
Yep.
come up with situations like, okay, if these are the logistics, boom, 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 like this is how I'm going to program or, just find opportunities to implement what you're learning, right? So you don't just let it go to waste, and then you can get feedback from your mentor and kind of have this cycle of growth because feedback is how we grow. Um, and that was honestly the biggest thing for me was when right I worked for Brandon Decker that first my sophomore year at ACU, and then I went home and I got to be fully in charge of those high school teams, and then
Mm.
that I had a group of college players for like 15 straight weeks, just by myself fully programming learning to make adjustments, all that stuff. That helped me more than so much more than like almost anything of being in the fire and having to do that and learn why I'm making these decisions and start to learn and put my own spin on programming and coaching and kind of start developing my own identity and who I want to be. Because I remember before that it was like I would look like maybe I'm doing a mock program and it's like I just want to copy everything from Brandon
Mhm.
Decker's program in terms of how that. But then once I started doing my own, now it's like, okay, now I'm starting to learn principles for myself of how I want to program and why I'm making these different decisions. And then it became so much easier from there. So I think that process of taking and observing, like super intentionally asking great questions, but then finding opportunities to put it into action, get feedback, refine it, do it again, get feedback, refine it, and just that constant process is huge.
Yeah. Perfect. If you can let everyone know where they can find the book and you as well.
Yeah. So it should, I think by the time this comes out, it will be out on Amazon. So able to get it on Amazon and Strength in Numbers. And then you can find information on it on my website there at johnbloomcoaching.com. Kind of talk about, what's in it, who's in it, just different aspects of the book there if you want more information. I've also been putting out a lot of stuff on social media, really Instagram at johnbloom30 with different quotes and insights from the coaches from their sections. And with that, I'll have different bonuses too during this first week that the book's out. So if you do get the book in the first week, you'll get access to over 15 bonus Zooms where I did Zooms with coaches in the book, just diving deeper into their answers. And then I've also got a PDF with basically how it strength numbers, the bonus chapters. So there's like 5 other coaches that weren't in the original book for different reasons, but they've got their own chapters now that you can get access to. So of both those things, if you get the book in the first week, there's some really cool bonuses there.
Perfect. I really appreciate you for reaching out and coming on. Um, I think that this book is great for that thing that I said, where it's a book that you can always reflect back on and go back and pick out different things that might apply to you now that perhaps didn't. So I've definitely enjoyed reading some of the chapters on it, and I'm a maniac. I know you kind of suggested that I jump around, but I have to follow a book the way it's
Yeah,
it's done.
yeah.
But I've personally read some of the chapters already, and I'm there's a lot of value in it too. So I really appreciate you for putting that together too.
No, I appreciate that and grateful for your support. Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's a big book, so you definitely like man, you don't have to be like Manny and read it front to back. Definitely you can definitely jump around to different coaches you want to be. And then that's the one thing I like too is like you don't have to feel like you have to like have one long continuous read of it. Like I feel like it's a book you can, okay, I want to just go read a little bit. I've got a little bit of time. I'm going to pick it up and read this coach or two's chapters, and then maybe another day do the same. Like it doesn't have to be this long,
Mhm.
continuous kind of read. You can kind of find wisdom at various points whenever you need it.
To piggyback off that, I also recommend you stew on some of the answers. Just like read a question, read the answer, and then sit on it and think about it. Because like sometimes I've caught myself just like putting the book down after a question. I'm just like, right, what ways can that be interpreted as well? Like,
Yeah.
'cause, like again, books are great because you can interpret and put your own twist on it, but also think about the reasons as to why that program worked for that coach, or that why that answer came about as well. And I think
Yeah.
that's always a good thing to think about. And like we always talk about, the principles and methodologies that we use in our programs are great for that coach because that's who invented it for his athletes. Like our program might not need a straight like triphasic face. It might not like
Hmm.
pure French contrast. Like we dip and dab into all of these little pockets of information to create our own way. And I think this is what this book is as well, as like try and think of the situations that that coach was in, how you would have handled it, and why they came to that conclusion too.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we were just talking about with, your mentors of taking, being super intentional and observing and stuff, taking what you want, what you don't want, and applying it to your situation. I think it's the same thing with the book. Like, you know, be really intent on learning and reading and thinking about it. And then, like you're saying, think about what can I take to fit to my situation, or how can I tweak it, or, whatever it is, how do I apply it your own life? Because I think that's what it comes down to. Like, you don't want to just read it to read it. Like, let it impact,
Mm,
think about it and let it impact what you're doing, and how you're doing life.
yeah, I agree. Really appreciate you for coming on, John. Peace.